I'm Ben Robichaux. I am from southern Louisiana, a small town about 50 miles southwest of New Orleans called Thibodaux. So this is where I got my undergraduate degree at a small university in town called Nicholls State University. I got an instrumental music education degree here, and then they allowed me to move on through their guidance to get a master's and a doctorate in composition, both from the University of Georgia in Athens. And from there, I was able to get a job in Elizabeth City, North Carolina for a year. I was a lecturer. I taught music technology at Elizabeth City State University for a year. But because I started my family and with my lovely wife, and now we have our 2-year-old, um, I decided to move us back to Thibodaux, Louisiana. So we're back where we started, kind of thing. And I took a job as an assistant band director at Thibodaux High School, which is the job that I currently have. And as far as who I am as a composer, I'm finding that the longer that I'm out of school, I feel like the music that I want to write is, if I could give it a style name, I would say I want it to be accessible. I want my family to listen to it and have an emotional reaction to it. And that's becoming more important to me over time. I want non-musicians and musicians alike to come away after listening to my music with something. What threw me for a little bit of a loop though was the theme and having to write about this horrible pandemic that we're going through, because I have to stop for a second and think, this means so much to people. This has so much gravity, not just in this country but around the world. And so the thought process about what the piece was going to be, it needed to have more of an emotional connection, and that threw me a bit for a loop because I have to think about how it affects me, how it affects my immediate surroundings, my area, and my country, and the world. The instrumentation, the cello, viola, violin, and clarinet, it's essentially a string quartet where you're replacing one of the violins with a clarinet, and the clarinet is one of the more agile, beautiful instruments in the wind family. So there's none of those instruments are cumbersome or have very many limitations. So I love the instrumentation personally. When composers write for an instrument that is just really flexible and can be virtuosic and has so many capabilities, I mean, I personally love the instrumentation. I'm of the mindset that composition doesn't just happen when you're putting pen to paper or when you're at the computer or at a piano. I like to think that if the ideas are churning, then the music is being written. So the first few days were, how am I going to organize this? And I decided to do something that feels a little lofty, but I felt like it was appropriate. I wrote this small requiem mass of miniatures. Um, and once I decided how those miniatures, the five multiple movements were going to be organized, then I kind of, on a microscopic level, how is each piece going to be organized? And then once I set it up like that, and I open the computer and start writing, it really kind of flows from there. If I was just given a commission for a requiem mass with this instrumentation, I probably would have, the movements would have been longer, stretched out further. um, but I like the fact that I had the constriction, the confinement, because it made me think of these miniatures, And if I was given the opportunity to expand it, I wouldn't expand the individual movements. I would just write several more miniatures, and it would just be a larger work with several movements. And I'm glad that the competition kind of made me think out of the box in that way. I liked how organized the competition sort of made me be, and I think in the future, I'll start being more organized. I think that this is kind of like upped my game as far as, how prepared I am at the onset of a piece. The piece is a requiem mass. It's in 5 movements. The first and the last movements are the traditional requiem mass movements. The introit, like the processional, has this very daunting, somber but moving feel to it. The last movement is In Paradisum, is where we're acknowledging that those that have passed away are in a better place. And then the inner 3 movements are sort of like this stark contrast to that, and they're all based on commentary made by political figures. The title of the piece sort of hits on what I wanted to hit on: mass for voiceless numbers. The idea of voiceless numbers being that, throughout this whole process, we've seen just data about what's happening, and a lot of what gets lost, I feel like, in just a number on a screen is that, these are human beings that we're talking about. So I wanted to hit on the emotional weight of that